I was in the ballroom, quietly sipping my champagne, just watching the scene unfold from the front row. Right in front of me, my husband was desperately trying to use his own suit jacket to cover his mistress, who was huddled on the floor in nothing but her panties and bra because the incredibly chic dress she was wearing had simply fallen apart out of nowhere. But if you think the humiliation stopped there, you have absolutely no idea about the massive embarrassment my husband suffered right after, which made people turn their faces in disgust and turned the ballroom into an absolute madhouse. But hold on, let me go back in time a bit and tell you how we got here. This is an original story from the When the Masks Fall channel. There are new channels out there posting my videos as if they were theirs, and that really hurts my work. If you notice you are not on the original channel, please leave and look for the real one. Now let us get to the story. Hit that notification bell. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old, and if you ask me where I graduated from, I will tell you that my university consisted of a foot pedal and a sewing needle. I do not have a college diploma hanging on my wall. I am the owner of a tailoring and dressmaking studio that I built from absolute scratch. But the person who taught me everything I know was my mom. She was a seamstress her whole life at a formal wear boutique downtown. I grew up hearing the sound of the sewing machine running until the early morning hours and seeing my mom with a measuring tape hanging around her neck. She was, without a shadow of a doubt, the best teacher in the world. But I did not start sewing custom pieces right away. I started by swallowing fabric dust. My mom made me hem pants, take in waists, and sew on buttons, and only after getting plenty of calluses and pricking my fingers countless times did she let me cut a pattern. She always said that sewing does not forgive laziness, and she was right. At 17, while my high school classmates were spending fortunes buying or renting prom dresses, I designed, cut, and sewed my own dress. I am incredibly proud of my needle-pricked hands and my roots, because it was that sweat that built my life. It was around the age of 25 that I met Gary. You know that kind of guy who seems to have the exact same essence as you? That was him. We bumped into each other at a town festival, and we clicked instantly. Back then, Gary was not the stuck-up snob he tries to be today. He was just a simple guy who rode the city bus, but he was full of ambition. We got married 2 years later in a little backyard wedding, with pigs in a blanket, a simple sheet cake, and absolutely no luxury. I sewed my own wedding dress, and he cried his eyes out when he saw me walking down the aisle. It was the happiest day of my life. He moved into my place. I already owned an older 2-story brick townhouse downtown, and the dynamic was perfect. On the bottom floor was my sewing studio with the machines and fabrics, and the top floor was our home. He did not have to worry about building a home from scratch, because my hard work had already put a roof over our heads. We split all the living expenses, but with one detail. He demanded that I pay the entire electric bill by myself, justifying it by saying the sewing machines in the studio used up too much power and that I was the one home all day. Sure. After all, the hot water he used for his morning and evening showers was heated by his own body heat, right? But I did not argue. Right at the beginning of our marriage, Gary got a job as a logistics assistant at a big chocolate factory. I do not know if you have heard of it, but let us call it Coco Craze Confections. I absolutely loved it when he got hired there, and I will confess why. Besides having a guaranteed salary, he always managed to bring home the factory rejects. Those were the chocolates that came out of the machine squished, the truffles that broke, basically the defective chocolates that could not be sold in stores. He went in early and got off super late, exhausted, but he never opened the front door empty-handed. We would sit on our old couch, eat those misshapen chocolates, and spend hours laughing, making plans about how we were going to grow together. That was a time when he valued the person standing by his side through the struggles. The problem with people who move up in life is that sometimes they try to erase where they came from. And Gary, as soon as Coco Craze promoted him to logistics supervisor, did not just erase his own past. He also tried to erase the wife who stood by him before he got there. The supervisor title went to his head in a way that made him unbearable to live with. He started walking around the house with his nose in the air, acting like he ran the company. And worse than that, he stopped bringing the defective chocolates home for me and started belittling my work. I found out in the worst way possible that Gary was dying of embarrassment to admit to the other supervisors that his wife was a seamstress. Whenever I went with him to company dinners and events, I would find out he was lying to his coworkers. He puffed out his chest to tell everyone that I was a major entrepreneur in the fashion industry, saying it in a highly rehearsed way that led people to believe I owned a high-end mall boutique, not that I was a woman who spent her days stepping on a machine pedal to finish a client's clothes. When I found out and confronted him about it in the car coming back from one of these parties, he shrugged it off as if I were crazy. He said it was no big deal and that he was not lying. After all, according to his twisted logic, I really was a fashion entrepreneur, and it was incredibly stupid of me to get mad over a more refined job title. On a Thursday morning, while he was drinking his coffee and adjusting the tie of his impeccable suit, oh, a quick note. He was the only one who went to work at the factory wearing a suit and liked being called sir by his subordinates. Pathetic. He dropped a sentence that caught me by surprise. He said he had recommended my studio to a coworker and that she would probably drop by on Saturday. Her name was Vivian, also a supervisor in his department. Instantly, my heart did a little happy jump. He finally stopped being ashamed of my work and is promoting my studio. And then, Saturday arrived. It was exactly 8 inches the morning when the studio doorbell rang. I looked through the glass, pressed the button to unlock the door, and there she came. When Vivian walked through the door, her overly sweet, exaggerated perfume practically embedded itself into my fabrics. She had that arrogant aura of someone who looked down on people with a face full of mild disgust. Looking closely, she actually had a pretty face, but her body was somewhat disproportionate. She was very skinny, absolutely completely bone-thin, but at the same time, she sported massive boobs and a perky butt that defied the laws of gravity. The math on that body simply did not add up, but I kept it to myself. Plastic surgery existed for a reason. The second she saw me, the stuck-up posture remained, but her grumpy face vanished, and she flashed a fake ear-to-ear smile. She was the poster child for phoniness. She had barely walked in and was already kissing my cheek like we were childhood best friends. "Claire, sweetie, it is such a pleasure to meet you. Gar never stops talking about your talent at the factory. He said you are a true fairy godmother with a needle." "Wow, really?" She called him Gar? Not even I called my husband Gar. Not being used to so much unearned intimacy so early in the morning, I just smiled back and thanked her. But it did not take even 5 minutes for her to reveal the true reason for all that friendliness. She tossed some clothes onto my counter for alterations and dropped the magic phrase. "Honey, Gar told me you would give me that wonderful friends and family discount, right?" Look at the nerve of this guy, offering discounts on my hard work. A bit annoyed, but wanting to please my husband's coworker to keep the peace, I smiled, and yes, I gave that trashy piece of work a discount, and that was how Vivian became a regular client. She showed up at my studio almost every week, ordering custom-made blouses and shirts, absolutely loving the discounts I gave her. While I took her measurements, she talked non-stop. She loved bragging about how the Coco Craze employees were terrified of her. She laughed as she boasted about being a tyrant supervisor who made her subordinates cry. One day, she told me, thinking it was the most hilarious thing in the world, that she screamed at and humiliated an employee in front of the whole department just because the poor girl spent 10 minutes in the bathroom pooping on company time. Right there, I saw her true colors. If you really want to know someone, give them a little bit of power. But Vivian's loose lips did not stop at work gossip. One day, while I was pinning the hem of her dress pants, she sighed heavily and decided to tell me about her love life. "Oh, Claire," she said, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. "If you only knew the amazing man I am seeing. He is an incredible guy, but there is just one little problem. I cannot see him whenever I want because he is married." I, kneeling on the floor, sticking a pin into the hem of her pants, I still decided to give her some advice. "Look, Vivian, be careful with married men," I advised without taking my eyes off the fabric. "That only brings headaches. It is better for you to wait until he separates from his wife before you get involved. What starts wrong rarely ends right." She looked at me through the mirror, gave a cynical little laugh, rolled her eyes, and shook her head as if she pitied me. "Oh, Claire, you are so old-fashioned. I do not want to marry him. I just want to enjoy the moment. And why does he need to leave his wife? His wife is great. She washes his skid-marked underwear, irons his shirts, cooks his food, everything I refuse to do for a man. I just get the good part, which is him taking me out to lunch at expensive restaurants, buying me gifts, and, well, you know what else." She would give a malicious little smile to break the tension after saying these absurd things. Vivian always followed up by pretending she was helping me. "You know, you have no idea how much everyone praises my clothes. I am recommending your studio to all my girlfriends." She spoke with the air of the most charitable person in the world. I would smile and thank her, but deep down I found it weird because months passed and none of those referrals she claimed to make ever showed up. You know that friend who says she will promote you to everyone and in the end does not even bring her own mother? That was Vivian. And you know what? Thank God. If everyone were like her, there would just be more fake, arrogant people stepping on my floors. But while I dealt with the clientele downstairs, my marriage was going downhill upstairs. Gary was different. That simple guy who cried at our wedding seemed to have been abducted. Suddenly, the factory became his second home. It started with a few hours of overtime in the middle of the week. Then he started working some weekends to finalize spreadsheets. Our relationship cooled down so much that we barely looked at each other. When we sat on the couch, that same couch where we used to share deformed chocolate and laugh at nothing, the silence was deafening. The conversations were shallow. He answered everything with a grunt or stayed hypnotized by his phone screen. And I, in my innocence as a woman in love, trying to hold things together, thought it was just a highly stressful phase at work. Until one night, the mood shifted. He came home, showered, ate dinner in silence, and sat on the edge of the couch. Out of nowhere, he brought up the company's big year-end holiday gala. It was the annual event where all the directors went, and everyone wanted to show off and kiss the bosses behind. And of course, all employees were invited and allowed to bring a +1. But let us tell the truth. It was just another one of those corporate events where everyone wears their best clothes and goes around pretending the company is one big happy family, where everyone smiles and says hello, and then talks behind your back the second you turn around. Yep. Most employees only went to these parties because it was free and there was an open bar and free food. But getting back to it, Gary said while staring at his phone, Vivian asked me to tell you that she is going to want to order her dress for this party from you. And right after that he said, but you know, about the party, I did not even really want to go, but I have to because I am a supervisor, right? I am sure it is going to be a really boring event full of fake people. It is just work talk, sales goals, upper management being annoying. You would just end up feeling out of place like at the other parties you have been to. You do not have to go with me if you do not want to. You can just stay home and rest. When I heard that, my blood boiled. What did he mean out of place? He was calling me a country bumpkin. I spent the entire year sewing and putting up with his bad moods. And when it came time to put on a nice dress, go to a fancy ballroom, and eat for free, I was supposed to stay home and rest? I, who could no longer stand that cold routine between us, did not accept the excuse. Are you crazy? Of course I am going, Gary, I replied firmly. It has been months since we went anywhere. All you do is work. I insist on going with you. I want to look really pretty and go to this party with you. Yes. When I said that, I noticed his smile completely collapse for a fraction of a second. The man swallowed hard, blinked rapidly, and then tried to force a strained smile to hide it. He nodded and said that was fine, but the atmosphere had turned awful. That set off an alarm in my head. My sixth sense went off immediately. Why had he reacted that way? Was he really that ashamed of me that he did not want me at his company party? I sat there on the couch chewing on those questions. Shortly after, he muttered that he was exhausted and went to take a shower. And it was exactly that night that the bomb dropped. While he was in there showering with the water heated by human warmth, he left his Apple Watch charging on the nightstand. I went into the bedroom to put some clothes away in the drawer, and the moment my hand bumped the furniture, the black screen of the watch lit up, displaying a text message notification from the sender, Vivian. And the message read, "Your wife is so clueless." I froze. My hand stopped in midair. My heart started racing. Why was Vivian calling me clueless to Gary? Did I mess up a measurement? Was she unhappy with a sewing job? I put the watch back in its place real quick. Minutes later, Gary walked out of the bathroom, drying his hair with a towel with the greatest peace of mind in the world. I took a deep breath, wiped the confused look off my face, and asked, Honey, did Vivian mention anything to you about the clothes I delivered this week? Is she satisfied? Oh, she did mention it. She said she loves the clothes you sew for her. That is why she is going to order her party dress from you too. I nodded, my mind still racing. I let the subject die there and went to bed. But inside, my professional curiosity was screaming. If she loved the clothes, why on earth was I clueless in her message? I needed to know what she had said about me to my husband. I waited for Gary to fall asleep. When I heard his breathing get heavy and he started to snore, I grabbed his phone and unlocked the screen using his fat thumb. I went to the bathroom without making a sound and opened his text messages with Vivian. And it was right there, sitting on the toilet lid, that my world collapsed. It had absolutely nothing to do with a bad hemline or crooked stitching. I scrolled up the screen and found months of history. They had been having an affair for 7 months right under my nose. The conversation was a freak show. What turned my stomach the most was reading the two of them arranging hookups in the middle of the workday. They laughed as they scheduled quick quickies in the dead files room or locked themselves in the returns warehouse at the chocolate factory. Gary was not working overtime or killing himself working on the weekends. He was rubbing up against his supervisor in the middle of his shift and going on dates to cheap roadside motels while I sat at home thinking about how hard he was working. But apparently, work was not the only thing he was doing hard. And as if the filthy physical betrayal was not enough, what tore my soul apart was reading the two of them laughing at me. Vivian called me clueless exactly because I never suspected she was the mistress, even after all the hints she rubbed in my face at the studio. Vivian texted, "Gar, you should have seen your wife's dumb face today." I talked about our affair right to her face, and she even gave me relationship advice. LOL. And my own husband, the man who slept next to me in my house, replied, "She really is too innocent, Viv. So silly. You are terrible." Haha. And Viper Vivian followed up with the worst insult of all. "The funniest part is that the idiot spends hours sewing the clothes you are going to rip off of me in the Coco Craze supply closet, and she still gives me a discount." I felt the blood rush to my head, and the anger only grew when I found out about the supposed promotion of my studio that Vivian claimed to do. Gar, the girls from work came to ask me again where the blouse I was wearing today was from. Can you believe it? Vivian wrote. I told them I bought it at Lumina, that super expensive boutique at the mall, LOL. And they actually believed it. People are so dumb they do not even know that Lumina shirts have a star embroidered on them. I will never give them the satisfaction of saying it was your idiot wife who made it. And the worst part was Gary's response. Thank God. For the love of God, definitely do not tell them. I would die of embarrassment if the executive board found out the logistics supervisor here is married to a basement seamstress. Reading that, with the phone screen glowing in the dark, I asked myself, if he is so ashamed of his basement seamstress, if he thinks I am so clueless, why does he not just leave and ask for a divorce? Right then, Vivian's words echoed in my head like a slap in the face. His wife is great. She washes his skid-marked underwear, irons his clothes, cooks his food, everything I refuse to do for a man. The answer was right there, rubbed in my face. Pure convenience. He did not ask for a divorce because I was the perfect fool. I kept the house clean, paid the entire electric bill, split all the other expenses, and still served as the ideal family man facade for his image at the company. He had the best of both worlds. The laundress, cook, and maid at home, and the skinny, fake-boobed mistress at Coco Craze. I cried. I cried every tear I had, locked in that bathroom, with a towel over my face to muffle the sound. But you know how women are. We cry, we suffer, but when reality finally sets in, oh my friends, the sadness evaporates. And what is left in place of those tears is a cold, sharp, and highly calculating hatred. My decision was made right then and there, with a swollen face in the dark. I was going to leave that worm, but I was not just going to throw his bags on the street, cause a screaming scene, and walk away looking like the crazy wife. Not at all. Gary and Viper Vivian thought I was the clueless one in this story. Well, they were about to find out what the clueless girl with a pair of scissors in one hand and a needle in the other was capable of doing. My mom always taught me that if the fabric no longer fits, you should not force a patch, and that was exactly what I was going to do. I wiped my tears, grabbed my own phone, and took dozens of pictures of his screen. I took pictures of every disgusting declaration, and especially the messages setting up hookups among the chocolate boxes. Gary was terrified of ruining his top-tier superstar supervisor image, right? Well, the Human Resources Department at Coco Craze Confections would surely love to know that the supply room was serving as a makeshift motel during business hours. I locked all those photos away like a secret trump card. The next day, Gary left for work, and shortly after, the studio doorbell rang. It was her, Viper, Vivian herself, slithering across my floor. Good morning, Claire. Gar said I was coming. I came to order my dress for the company holiday gala. I confess that for a second my hand itched to slap her right across the face, but I took a deep breath. I put on my best fake smile. I used the exact same cynical friendliness she used with me. Of course, Viv. Gar did mention you were coming. While I ran the measuring tape around that disproportionate body, she babbled on about how the design she chose was going to stop the party. A very tight brown strapless dress, and she showed me the reference photo. Wow, this design is stunning. I am going to make the exact dress you deserve, and I am going to use a brand new sewing technique just for you, I answered, smiling from ear to ear. And of course, she did not forget her classic line. Give me that friends and family discount, okay? That same afternoon, I grabbed my purse and went walking downtown. I bought the brown velvet fabric she asked for and a few spools of thread. The first step of my revenge involved the kitchen and the laundry room. Remember that conversation about how the wife was only good for washing skid-marked underwear, ironing clothes, and cooking? Well, the well ran dry. When he came home that day and saw there was no dinner ready, he came down to the studio complaining about being hungry and asked about dinner. I shrugged and said, forcing a face of guilt and pity. Oh, honey, I am completely swamped with orders in the studio this month. It is too many orders for the holidays, and my patience is hanging by a thread, and my time is too. You are going to have to figure out your own food and your own laundry, okay? His eyes went wide with indignation. Figure out my own food and laundry? But I do not even know how to make rice. I do not know how to iron clothes, Claire. Oh, my dear. Stop by the corner grocery store and buy some ramen noodles or microwave TV dinners. And about the clothes, we'll send them to the dry cleaners. After all, you are a supervisor, right? You make good money for that. I replied, focused on adjusting my scissors. The little prince huffed with anger instantly. Dry cleaners? Claire, are you crazy? Do you know how much it costs to have suits and shirts pressed at the dry cleaners? It is way too expensive. I looked deep into his eyes, and the perfect response was right on the tip of my tongue. Just stop spending your paycheck on that skinny tramp of a mistress, and you will have plenty of money to pay for the dry cleaners. Inside, I really wanted to say that, but in reality, I just scolded him. Tell me something, Gary. What if I died today? How would you manage to survive alone in this house? You were not born helpless, so figure it out. Look up a tutorial on YouTube on how to wash and iron clothes, how to fry an egg. YouTube has everything. His eyes widened, visibly scared, and he took a step back. In 4 years of marriage, I had never, ever spoken to him like that, or in that tone of voice. He opened his mouth to argue back, but saw my face full of pure hatred, swallowed hard, and left without saying a word. But in the end, it worked. He started sending his clothes to the dry cleaners and started living off ramen, frozen meals, and food delivery. And that was when I began the second part of my plan. When he left for work, I would go to his closet, grab his work clothes a few at a time, and take them down to the studio. With the greatest precision in the world, I undid the side seams of his dress pants and took every piece in by a fraction of an inch. Nothing too exaggerated so he would not get suspicious, just enough so the button would barely close over his stomach. I took in all his clothes on the machine, inch by inch. When he went to get dressed, he felt his pants barely zipping up. His shirts would have the buttons straining across his chest. The best part was watching his desperation from the front row. The first time the pants felt tight, Gary started screaming through the house that the dry cleaners had shrunk his Brooks Brothers pants. I had to cover my mouth to muffle my laughter in the studio when I heard him on the phone, cursing out the poor dry cleaning attendant, demanding his money back because they ruined his insanely expensive suit. In the middle of this game, he changed dry cleaners twice in the same week. But since the shrinkage problem continued even at the other cleaners, reality finally set in for him. Gary started grumbling in the corners that he was getting fat because of the ramen, the microwave meals, and the fast food. The man's level of vanity and insanity reached such a point that he started doing intermittent fasting and starving himself. But the best part was when he came home frustrated, saying he had stepped on the scale at the pharmacy and his weight was exactly the same. The math did not add up in his empty head. How was his weight the same, but his pants would not go past his hips? I, with my best clueless face, looked at him and dropped this gem. Honey, it must be water retention. Eating too much ramen and fast food does that. The sodium bloats your entire body from the inside. Believe it or not, mister. Vane fell for my story immediately. The next day, he had already booked lymphatic drainage massage sessions at a clinic to try to depuff and fit into his pants, but my stitches were relentless. Since his pants were never going to fit again for anything in this world, and the massages could not perform miracles, with 3 days left until the company party, Gary admitted defeat. He had to dig deep into his pockets and buy a brand new Brooks Brothers suit in his usual size. He was practically crying with anger. And it was on that exact same day that Vivian, stepped into the studio for the final fitting of her dress. She walked out of the dressing room, thinking she was the hottest thing around. I looked her up and down. The dress was long, a strapless design, made of brown velvet fabric, and very tight to the body. Honestly, the dress was beautiful, but she looked like a tall, thin log of poop. I broke into the biggest smile in the world. After all, that dress perfectly matched her personality. After Vivian left, skipping away with her ticking time bomb inside the shopping bag, I locked the studio door, walked up the stairs, opened the closet, and there it was. The insanely expensive, brand new Brooks Brothers suit Gary had bought. I took it down to the studio, grabbed the dress pants, turned them inside out, and with my precision scissors, I made a few tiny snips right in the center seam, right in the middle of the butt. I did not rip the fabric. I just weakened the structural stitches. Yes, the moment I asked him to pick something up off the floor for me, those pants were going to rip. And to ensure the embarrassment started from the very first minute, I took the opportunity to hem the pants up about an inch and a half. And finally, the big day of the highly anticipated company holiday party arrived. Gary was finishing getting ready in the bedroom in his brand new suit. He looked at himself in the mirror, tugged at his pant leg, and asked me, looking a bit suspicious, "Honey, do you not think this hem is a little short? They look like high waters." I turned around, put on my best fashion consultant face, and lied through my teeth. "Not at all, Gary. It is the modern Italian cut. It is perfect." He puffed out his chest, believed it instantly, and went to the living room to wait for me. Meanwhile, I went to put on my armor. I chose a stunning emerald green silk dress that I had designed and sewn myself with the utmost care in the world. I did my makeup flawlessly and put on a killer pair of heels. When I walked into the living room, Gary's jaw literally dropped. His eyes sparkled the exact same way they did, full of love, when we met years ago. He walked over slowly, took my hand, and treated me like a true princess. He complimented me up and down, full of pride, but inside my heart was made of ice. His charm had returned, but now it was too late. Our marriage had already been shredded. We went to the party, and when we arrived at the ballroom, the tables turned. Gary, who previously was ashamed of his seamstress wife, refused to let go of my waist. He made a point of showing me off to all the supervisors and the entire executive board. I saw people looking at me and whispering about how elegant I looked. It was then that the doors opened, and Viper Vivian appeared. She came strutting in her brown velvet strapless dress, thinking she was the best thing since sliced bread. And to draw even more attention, she must have added extra padding, because her breasts looked twice as big and were practically popping out of the strapless neckline. But her fake smile of superiority collapsed as soon as she laid eyes on us. The shock was immediate. She realized I was drawing way more attention than her silicone chocolate tube costume. And then she looked at Gary. He barely paid any attention to his mistress's boobs, which were almost leaping out of the dress because it was visibly overstuffed, because he was drooling with pride standing next to his wife. I noticed the envy and anger sparking in her eyes immediately. She walked toward us and, unable to hide her venom, gave a crooked little smile and delivered her first jab. "Wow, Claire, look at you. You do not even look like yourself. Did you run into a fairy godmother today?" She laughed at her own joke and quickly continued, "But enjoy it while you can, Cinderella, because at midnight you have to run back to the studio to spend the rest of the night stepping on that machine pedal, right?" I was about to answer, but to my absolute surprise, Gary stepped up to defend me in front of her. "Vivian, back off," he said with a firm voice. "Do not speak to my wife like that." If Vivian was already jealous after being reprimanded by her lover in front of his clueless wife, she practically foamed at the mouth. The color drained from her face. Not knowing what to do to regain control, she resorted to the work excuse. "Wow, Gary, what a terrible mood. It was just a little joke. We are fresh, we are close like that, right, Claire?" Crickets. Silence. "Anyway, Gar, we need to go to the other side of the room to speak with the directors. It is urgent. It is about next year's logistics plans. Just the two of us. Let us go." "Not today, Vivian. Today is the holiday party. I do not want to talk about work." He refused, still holding my waist. She turned bright red, shot him a deadly glare, and made a subtle nod, demanding he go with her. Gary, looking awkward, swallowed hard and turned to me. "Honey, wait here for me real quick. I will be right back." He followed her like a little puppy. I stayed exactly where I was, holding my glass of champagne. From afar, I watched a furious Vivian arguing with Gary in the middle of the room. Gary kept looking around, desperate, trying not to draw attention, but his high-water pants were already a spectacle on their own, and Vivian's shrill voice was drawing stares from several people nearby. It was at that exact moment that a waiter stopped next to me holding a tray. I looked at him, looked at the full pitcher of ice water on his tray, and the opportunity flashed right before my eyes. "Excuse me, would you pretend to accidentally spill water on someone for $200? I asked in the sweetest tone in the world. The waiter looked at me confused, thinking it was a prank, but quickly realized I was dead serious. A wide, mischievous smile spread across his face. "Give the order, boss, with absolute pleasure. My manager already told me today is my last day of work anyway. Apparently, the universe was playing on my team." I pointed discreetly with my glass. "You see that couple arguing over there on our right? The skinny woman who looks like a log of chocolate and the guy in the suit with the high-water pants next to her? I see them. I want you to pretend to trip and dump that entire pitcher of ice water, ice and all, right down the middle of the woman in brown's back. But it has to be dead center on her back, okay?" I opened my evening clutch, pulled out $200 bills, and placed them delicately on his tray. The waiter winked at me, pocketed the cash, gripped the pitcher firmly, turned his back, and started walking toward them. And this is where, my dear listeners, I need to take a dramatic pause in this story to explain why on earth I asked the waiter to do something like that. Because you are crazy, Claire. Maybe a little, but I swear I had a brilliant reason. Remember I went downtown to buy some special thread to make Her Highness's dress? Well, I bought what we call magic thread. In the sewing world, we use this thread just to baste garments. You know when the seamstress puts some temporary stitches in the fabric just so the client can try the clothes on and see if they fit? Exactly. And do you know why we call it magic? Because it is made of a material that reacts to moisture. The second that thread comes into contact with water, it simply melts away as if it never existed. My grand revenge of the night was that I sewed Vivian's entire dress with it, from top to bottom, including the zipper in the back. Am I an evil genius or what? Now let us go back to the ballroom. The waiter approached the two of them, right when Gary had his back turned and Vivian was facing him with her finger in his face. You could not tell what she was saying, but she looked very, very angry. The guy did not hold back. He came up behind the miserable woman, took a stumble worthy of a daytime soap opera, and poured the entire pitcher down her back. Splash. She let out a scream so high-pitched and shrill that the party music seemed to stop. The entire room, including the general manager of Coco Craze at the front table, froze to watch the scene. Gary's eyes widened in shock. Vivian's blood boiled. Completely soaked, she turned to the waiter and, revealing to the entire executive board the kind of tyrant she was, started screaming and humiliating the poor guy in the middle of the room. You imbecile. You idiot. Are you blind? Do you have any idea how much this dress cost? You are useless. You cannot even serve water. I am going to have you fired right now, you worthless piece of trash. The waiter lowered his head and, faking guilt and desperation, began to beg. I am so sorry, ma'am. It was an accident. I tripped. But Vivian would not stop, blind with rage. Apologies do not pay for my damages, you piece of garbage. Look at me. I am going to ruin your... She could not even finish screaming the threat, because it was exactly in that second that the water finished doing its job. The gel of the thread melted completely down her back, and since the dress was skin-tight due to the extra breast padding, the sheer pressure of the fabric did the heavy lifting. The zipper seam simply let go from top to bottom all at once. Vivian's dress did not just fall. It slid down to the floor like a banana peel, leaving the tyrant supervisor planted in the middle of the ballroom in nothing but her panties and bra. But the humiliation did not stop there. Everyone saw the truth. She was visibly wearing massive foam inserts in her bra, and her shaping panties had foam pads so huge it looked like a balloon was shoved into each cheek. It was not plastic surgery. It was silicone padding. Desperate and red as a tomato, Vivian let out a muffled shriek, hunched over completely, and quickly dropped to the floor, trying to pull the dress up, trying to cover herself in any way possible. The entire ballroom let out a collective gasp. People had their hands over their mouths, holding back laughter, unable to believe what they were seeing. I heard a woman next to me comment to her colleague, "Oh my God, no way." She was always bragging that she paid $50,000 for her plastic surgery. Another older woman yelled, "Oh my gosh, for the love of God, someone cover the poor thing. Gary, take your jacket off and give it to her." Gary snapped out of his trance, sweating cold with desperation. He frantically started taking off his suit jacket to cover his mistress, who was half naked on the floor. He managed to get the jacket off and, in a burst of panic, crouched down violently to cover Vivian. And that is when it happened. The deafening sound of ripping fabric echoed through the ballroom. The center seam of his insanely expensive Brooks Brothers pants blew out. Here is another side note. Gary hated wearing underwear with dress pants. He always complained that the elastic showed through the fabric and looked ugly. Now tell me, am I an evil genius or what? His pants split entirely down the back and, with absolutely no underwear underneath, the hairy butt of the superstar logistics supervisor popped out, completely exposed to the open air, pointed exactly in the direction of the table where the directors and owners of the factory were sitting, who quickly turned their faces the other way. If the room was already in shock before, now it had turned into pandemonium. There were screams of horror, uncontrollable laughter, and people rubbing their eyes, not believing what they were witnessing live. The scene looked like a terrible Saturday Night Live sketch. The mistress on the floor trying to hide her silicone inserts and the suited-up supervisor with his pants above his ankles and his bare cheeks hanging out. In the midst of that widespread chaos, I heard a man laughing loudly from the back of the room and yelling, "Holy crap! What kind of crazy party is this? Every year should be like this." People started laughing loudly and agreeing. I saw several employees with their phones recording the disaster. Vivian, red as a beet, managed to stand up, covering herself with Gary's jacket. Meanwhile, the bare-butted man remained stuck on the floor, sitting on his own tucked legs to hide the massive tear. It was then that Vivian's hate-filled eyes locked with mine. She must have had a few strong drinks, or maybe she was just a natural-born drama queen, because she came limping in my direction, huffing with anger. "You third-rate seamstress," she screamed with absolutely no filter. "This dress is garbage. You are a terrible seamstress. I am going to sue you for this embarrassment. This is why your husband is dying of embarrassment over you, because you cannot even make a dress right." I stayed standing in the exact same spot, sipping my champagne with the greatest calm in the universe. My calmness drove her even crazier, and that was when she tried to deal the final blow, screaming for the whole executive board to hear. "And you want to know something else, you piece of trash? You are getting played. That is right, your little husband and I have been together for months." Gary, still sprawled on the floor, widened his eyes in absolute panic, watching his family man facade circle the drain in front of the entire company. He tried to deny it right away. That is a lie," he yelled from the floor, stuttering in desperation and looking at me. "It is all a lie, Claire. I swear I love you. I would never cheat on you, much less with this weird, skinny woman." When Vivian heard him calling her a weird, skinny woman to save his own skin, her blood boiled over. "Excuse me? Are you biting the hand that feeds you, Gary?" she screamed, turning her machine gun of hatred back at him. "Then how do I know about your birthmark shaped like a chicken nugget right on your groin?" The entire ballroom exploded in a fresh wave of uncontrollable laughter. Gary, feeling the last drop of his dignity washing away, pointed his finger in his mistress's face and yelled, "Shut up, Vivian. You crazy woman. You are a despicable person." That was when I took 2 steps forward. I looked down at Gary cowering on the floor. "Really, Gary? She is the despicable person? Because to me, you two are cut from the same cloth." In pure desperation, Gary made the worst mistake of the night. He turned to me and got on his knees to beg, completely forgetting that his pants were blown open. When he got on his knees, his hairy butt was even more exposed and aimed right at the ballroom. A few women and the directors in the back made faces of pure disgust. Ignoring his own public shaming, he clasped his hands together and begged, crying, "Claire, for the love of God, believe me. This woman is crazy. I never had an affair with her. She always hit on me, but I always rejected her. I thought she was just my friend. Do you think I would recommend a woman to your studio if I was having an affair with her? What kind of man would I be to do something so absurd?" Before I could even answer, Vivian rolled her eyes with contempt and screamed, "Oh, Gary, have some shame. Are you trying to act like a saint now? You were the one who insisted I go to your wife's studio, and you even begged me to keep it a secret here at the factory that she was a seamstress, just because you were ashamed of her, you coward." Gary's eyes bulged pale as his secret was thrown into the fan like that. I looked deep into his eyes, and it was right there, in that pathetic moment, that I saw the real Gary, the deceitful coward I had never noticed. I gave a cold smile and threw the question back, destroying the rest of his excuse. "Yeah, Gary, I think we already know exactly what kind of man you are, but tell me something. If you two never had an affair and were just work friends, how does your friend know about your birthmark shaped like a chicken nugget right on your groin?" The whole room fell silent, waiting for the answer. Gary turned white. He started stuttering, sweating cold, trying to invent a lame excuse that she must have seen it in the locker room by accident, but the lie did not hold up. Defeated and backed into a corner, he admitted it, crying like a child. "Okay, forgive me, Claire." He sobbed on his knees. "It was only one time, I swear. I deeply regret it. Please do not leave me. Do not end our marriage." "There is no more marriage, Gary," I replied dryly. "Our marriage ended the moment you felt ashamed of the woman who put the roof over your head. I will leave your things in front of my house. If you want to make sure the garbage truck does not take them, get there early." He buried his face in his hands and continued crying on his knees, completely destroyed. I turned my back on my ex-husband, crossed my arms, and turned to Vivian. "And as for you," I said, looking at her with disgust, "I hope to never see you stepping foot in my studio again." Vivian, shivering from the cold and from sheer hatred, fired back, spitting her words. "I am the one who will never step foot in that dump you call a studio again, and I want my money back. Your work is garbage." This piece of trash dress popped open on its own. I let out an ironic laugh. "The dress was of excellent quality, sweetheart. The only problem there is that the seams and the zipper were not expecting to hold the amount of cheap foam padding you stuffed in there. The room let out another wave of mocking murmurs, and I continued before she could even take a breath. And another thing, if I were so terrible and my studio was a dump, why did you come back every week to order shirts, crying for a discount? Just so you could go to your friends later and lie that you paid a fortune at Lumina. Vivian froze. Her eyes widened in pure shock, and she immediately looked at Gary on the floor. Taking advantage of her despair, I leaned in real close to her ear and whispered, destroying the last shred of pride she had left. You always thought you were the smart one, did you not? But the only clueless fool here was always you. I always quoted you a much higher price than the pieces were actually worth, and then pretended I was giving you a massive discount just so you would stop whining and think you were getting the upper hand. Vivian's face twisted with rage. She screamed at the top of her lungs for anyone who wanted to hear. You crappy seamstress. I am going to tell everyone in the city that you are a terrible professional. I am going to ruin your career. I stepped back a little, adjusted the neckline of my green dress, smiled, and played my final card. Not if I ruin yours first. And with that, I turned my back and walked with my head held high toward the exit. But before walking through the double doors of the ballroom, I could not resist. I took one last glance back over my shoulder, and the scene I saw closed the night with a golden key. Gary was picking up what was left of the wet brown velvet dress off the floor and wrapping it around his own waist like a weird skirt. Vivian, still wearing his suit jacket, started screaming at him and slapping his shoulders and arms, while the people around them continued laughing and recording that absolute freak show. The party music played in the background, and the crowd's laughter sounded like a true symphony. I walked out the front doors of the venue with the greatest peace of mind I have ever felt in my entire life. I walked up to the valet to get my car. When the valet pulled up in front of me and I opened the door, I flashed my most genuine smile of the night when I saw the keychain dangling in the ignition. Gary had a habit of keeping his house keys attached to the car keys. In other words, he had absolutely no way of getting into my house. I would not even have to bother calling a locksmith to change the locks in the middle of the night. The piece of trash was going to have to sleep on a park bench thinking about her. I got in the car, turned on the radio, and drove home, laughing to myself. As soon as I walked through the door, I did not waste a minute. I opened his closet and stuffed absolutely everything, shoes, ties, and those damn tight suits, into 3 black trash bags. I dragged it all to the curb and locked the gate. When dawn started to break, the sound of an engine made me turn on my phone and check the security cameras. A car parked on the street. Gary got out, walked up to the sidewalk, and opened the trash bags to check if his clothes were in there. He shoved everything into the back seat, took one last long look at the house he had just lost, and got back into the vehicle. But what made me laugh out loud alone in my living room was noticing who was behind the wheel of that car. It was her, Vivian. The two of them had just called each other every name in the book in front of their entire company. And even after all that trashy behavior, after trying to destroy each other, there they were, back together again just a few hours later. She acting as his late-night chauffeur for the guy who publicly denied her, and him accepting the ride. It is impressive how there are people in the world with a complete lack of self-respect. They truly were made for each other. On Monday morning, I hit send, and the email with the photos and text messages between the two went straight to the inboxes of HR and the executive board. The irony is that several female employees from Coco Craze came to check out my studio and became loyal clients. The studio grew so much that I was finally able to hire an assistant to split the workload with me. And it is exactly those clients who told me the end of the soap opera. They told me that on Monday, after the holiday party, the humiliation for those two dragged on. It turns out the company pulled the security camera footage from the supply room to verify anonymous tips. Meanwhile, Gary and Vivian spent their entire shift suffering. The tables had turned. The same employees they used to humiliate spent the day making jokes and calling them Mr. and Mrs. Chicken Nugget in the hallways. It was late in the afternoon, after enduring a full day of torture and mockery, that the two were called into the manager's office and fired with cause. They were kicked out of the factory, holding cardboard boxes, with no right to their 401k match, severance pay, or unemployment benefits. And because the scandal was so massive, combined with the videos of the fight at the party, their affair leaked. Both of them ended up on the human resources blacklist for all the companies in the area and were never able to get management positions again. And the gossip flowed freely at the studio. The girls told me Gary was living with Vivian in her rented apartment, but since neither of them could find another job with a manager's salary to fund their fake luxury lifestyle, the bills piled up fast. It did not take long for them to be forced to give up the apartment and move into a tiny studio apartment in a bad neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Today, The big news going around is that Gary and Vivian found jobs and are working together at a fast food joint called Mac's Burger Joint downtown, making minimum wage. Of course, there is absolutely nothing wrong with those jobs. After all, every honest day of work is honorable, and I built my own life with the sweat of my hands. The true karma in this story is not about the job, but about their destroyed egos. Two extremely arrogant people who walked around with their noses in the air, humiliated their subordinates, and were ashamed of my profession. Now they are forced to wake up before dawn, ride a crowded bus, and sweat it out over a hot grill and serving tables all day long, just to be able to pay the rent for their tiny apartment. And I hope this time they do not make the same mistake and sneak off for a quickie in the supply closet of that burger joint. Yuck. I prefer not even to think about it. What matters to me today is that my divorce finally went through. Gary did not have the courage, or maybe not even the bus fare, to show up in front of the judge. He missed the court date, and I won everything by default judgment, which, for those who do not know, is when the other party fails to show up and present a defense. The judge awarded me absolutely everything I asked for. Good for me. Today, the house and the studio are 100% mine. My business grows every single day through the sweat of my honest hard work. And my piece of trash ex-husband became nothing more than a pathetic memory of the past. People say that, in life, you should always nip evil in the bud. But the tip I pass on to you is, if you also snip the seam of the pants of the person who cheated on you, divine justice acts much faster, and I guarantee you it is way more fun. If you stayed with me until the end, write the words chicken nugget in the comments. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Do not forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next drama. A big kiss and see you in the next video.